Hi, I'm Sterling Edwards. Thank you for joining me. Let's spend a few minutes painting a southwestern scene. I'm talking about those wide open vistas with the mesas. I just got back from a trip out in the Southwest not too long ago in Monument Valley, Canyon de Chelly. I mean, just totally extraordinary country. And what amazed me the most were two things: the large sky and also the colors, just most extraordinary lavenders and oranges and grays. Let's spend a few minutes painting one of those and see what we can do. Now, when I do a western scene, especially one like this, I like to put a big sky. I like to really accentuate the size of the sky, so I keep a very low horizon on my paper. So we're going to do that. Let's just go sketch in a very low horizon back here. This is where the sky meets the ground. And we're going to suggest a few mesas. Here's one sticking up right here, kind of goes across like that. And I'm making them almost kind of playful looking, because that's really how they are. They're such unusual shapes, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. Maybe up here in the foreground there's something that's just like so. Just a very nice big shape. That's a good idea for a painting right there. Very, very simple. And those of you who know me know that I don't do a great deal of drawing. I just put in a few large shapes and go for it, because the brush will do so much of the creating as I get into the process. Now, before I start painting, let's take a look at some of the materials we're going to use for this demonstration. Let's come over to the palette. This is the Sterling Edwards Big Brush palette, and I have a variety of 14 My Mary Blue colors. These are a very fine quality Italian paint. They're all transparent except for Payne's Gray, which is semi-opaque. Everything else is very transparent, and I've got a good assortment of reds, yellows, oranges, greens, blues, and violets. I also have two containers for water, one to keep my brushes clean, and the other to add clean water to my painting as needed. This is a roll of toilet tissue. It's a very handy tool. It's toilet tissue with about 4 or 5 feet of paper towel, folded in half, lengthwise, and wrapped around it. It's a wonderful blotter for my brushes. I'm doing today's demo on a piece of Fabriano Artistico 140-pound cold press paper. It has a wonderful tooth to it and a very velvety surface. It's ideal for this kind of a painting. The brushes I'm using, I'll be using some of the brushes I designed. These are the Sterling Edwards signature brushes, just a good variety of flat brushes and rounds, including a little number 6 rigger. Just a very, very basic set of nylon brushes. And I'll also be using these. These are brushes I also designed. These are the Sterling Edwards blending and glazing brushes. They're very, very stiff bristles. They're wonderful for blending, laying in soft shades of color, losing edges, and so forth. They also hold a lot of paint, so you can lay in very rich applications of paint as well as these soft blended edges. So you'll see me using these throughout the demonstration. Now, what I want to do on this piece is I want to suggest that there's light way back in the distance. It's almost as though you're looking at a backlit scene. The light is way back in the distance, and we're seeing the silhouettes of mesas, and they're coming towards us. The ones in the distance, of course, are very, very faint and very light colored. As they come forward, we'll start seeing darker and darker colors, and then we'll also see all kinds of just interesting textures emerge out of these. So let's start by wetting most of the paper. Now, the paper is taped down to a gator board, just a very hard foam board, and I'm wetting pretty much the entire sky area and right down to the desert floor right there. Because we're going to put in a lot of color right now and do a quick sky. When I say a quick sky, I mean we're really going to do a quick sky. We're just suggesting some color. This is Golden Lake. Let's start the horizon and put in some Golden Lake. It's very, very light, using the same 2-inch bristle brush. It lays the color in very, very smoothly, and I can come along with that bristle brush also and get this nice velvety application of color. Now let's work up towards the top of the page. It's a graded wash. Only usually with a graded wash you start at the top and grade down. This time I'm starting at the horizon and grading up. It just gives me a little different look. Let's take some primary red magenta and mix with that. Now we're going to start at the top and grade down. So we get this nice, interesting, warm sky. Let's make it a little bit darker. I want you to be able to see it. Now these little streaks you see in the sky are going to disappear as the paper starts to dry, so don't let those distract you from anything, because they won't stick around. grab back a little bit more magenta. Got a real nice backdrop now for these little purple and gray mesas, which are going to be in the foreground and in the middle ground. So let's start suggesting a few of those colors. I'm using a 1-inch flat brush. This is a very soft nylon brush with a chisel edge on it. And I want to start suggesting a few background shapes. So I'm using violet blue and a little bit of cyan blue. And I'm getting most of the water out of the brush. I'm using that blotter to really kind of take most of the excess out. And let's start putting a few shapes in. Now the paper's still wet, so we're going to get a nice soft edge back there, which is good. That really kind of helps create the effect of the illusion of distance. Let's add some more violet to it right up in here. We know these are red rock formations, but that does not mean we have to paint them red. We can paint these any color we want, and these violet and blue combinations against that pinkish yellow sky are so beautiful. The colors just all seem to really work. Maybe there's a little spire of rock sticking up right there off in the distance. Now that's going to dry back very light, and I'm trying to, as I paint this, if you can zoom in real close on this little mesa, I'm trying to give this thing a little character. Even though it's off in the distance, we still want to see little changes in terrain, changes in color, rock movement, things like that. Makes it much more interesting just having just a flat shape. And the colors are indicative of what you would find out there. Now we're going to let that dry a little bit, but while that dries, let's take another color. This is Avignon Orange, and I'm mixing some Golden Lake with it. It's almost like a Mars red with a little bit of yellow mixed with it. And let's see if we can suggest some of the desert floor out here. I can go right across this area up here because that's going to be very dark. So I'm not worried about disturbing anything up there. I'm leaving a little bit of white. It almost looks like sunlight hitting that sand out there. Really creates the illusion of distance. And I think I'm also going to take my number 4 round brush and take a little bit of this color, which is called green blue. Put a little bit of Golden Lake with it. And we're going to suggest a few clusters of fauna. These are, they actually call this snake grass. And it's everywhere. These little clumps of grass, it's kind of a teal color. You see a lot of it out there, and I think it gives the painting a lot more excitement to have these little colorful things. That's all wet, and so is the sky. So let's just keep working on this area down here for a little bit. Now we're getting up into the foreground. Let's take some more of the Avignon Orange. And I'm using a little drier mix, not quite as much water in it. I'm also adding some of the brown. This is still to grain brown, very, very clean, very transparent brown. And I'm putting some violet with it. I'm looking for a nice kind of a reddish violet. I'm going to put just a little bit of blue to darken it just a touch. Because right up in here, this is the foreground mesa. And there's rocks sticking up, there's all kinds of things. And the darker I make this, the further away this will look. So that's my thought process. I'm trying to really push that way back in the distance. These little studies are fun, and some of them turn out to be quite striking because the colors are just so suggestive of that area of the country. You see this is dry paper down here, so I'm getting that nice dry brush, which really kind of helps add to the feeling of cragginess and rocks and so forth. Not too much water in that brush. Let's see if we can keep that under control a little bit. See how nice that sky dried back? It's very, very smooth, has a nice feel to it. All those little ripples and streaks went away, which I knew they would. Now let's take a bristle brush. This is a 1-inch stiff bristle brush. Let's see if we can't blend just a little tiny bit. Let's soften some of those edges. You can actually hear that brush scrubbing in. It's almost like a little scrub brush. Now that's going to dry in a few minutes, but as I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to keep adding more and more darks. These are violets and purples. Violets and orange, I mean. Let's see if we can keep adding a little bit more substance in these rocks. And I'm also adding some contour lines and implying that the ground has a little movement to it. Now this area right in here, we're going to put some more of that snake grass. I know my wife will see this and she'll get a chuckle out of this, but they told us that was snake grass, and from that point on I couldn't get her out of the car because the stuff's everywhere. So she was convinced that every clump has a snake just waiting to bite an ankle that walks by. So, but you do see the stuff everywhere you go. It's very prevalent out there, and it's actually quite beautiful because it has that nice rich teal color to it. And let's do some more of the snake grass. Maybe there's a couple clumps right in here. Let's let that dry just for a second. Let's discuss what we're looking at. In fact, let's just try one more thing. We're going to take a sharp object. In this case, I'm going to use this brush handle. It has a nice beveled edge, which is used for scraping. We're going to take this and we're going to scrape in a few rocks by just, that area's kind of losing the shine a little bit, so now we can go in there and scrape in a few rocky shapes. They kind of lend themselves to the cragginess of the scene. And we'll stop real quickly and take a dryer and dry this, because it's reached a point right now I really can't do a whole lot more without risking getting these very obnoxious blossoms. These edges dry back very soft up here because they hit that wet paper. Now that we've established where the shapes are, we have a good variety of colors. It's just a question now coming back in on dry paper, cleaning those edges up a little bit, and doing some work on the snake grass, and we'll be finished. Let's stop and dry this real quick, and I'll be right back. Okay, we have dry paper. Now let's come back in this little mesa over here. We already have the dark colors mixed. On dry paper, I can come back and very easily reinforce those edges. Now, soft edges are nice, but we don't want too many soft edges, especially not in the wrong place. So this gives me a chance to go in there and add some strength to the shapes. I'm just using that 1-inch flat brush. And I'm also going to come in here and just put just a little bit of suggestion of contour on some of these rocks. You can do as much or as little of this as you want. I like to put just enough that it kind of tells the story, then I kind of back off and let it kind of rest on its own, because you can easily go in there and just destroy all these pretty colors. I don't want to do that. So these little suggestions of strata and design do a lot to kind of give the rock some structure and just make the entire scene look a little bit more southwestern. Last thing I'm going to do in this piece is put just a little tiny suggestion of negative shapes along the bottom of some of these little grassy shapes. So I've got the same green-blue color, a little bit of this other color mixed with it just to make it dark. Let's just put a little suggestion of negative branches and limbs and things. And we'll take the same rigger brush and just put a few more little cracks in the rocks. And you see a lot of that out there. Now you can take a little piece like this and just push it as far as you want. We could always have little dead trees and things sticking up in the foreground, but sometimes it's not always necessary to do that. We're just trying to suggest to the viewer this is a little southwestern scene with a distant mesa and a nice warm, maybe early evening sky, late afternoon sky or something. And that pretty well tells a story. What makes this piece work are the colors. The colors are very southwestern, but also the values. The sandy, almost peach colored sky, the violets, the blues, and then these beautiful red rock formations in the foreground with these teals, these nice turquoise colors, which are just so indicative of the area. I hope this gives you some good ideas. It's been a fun little piece of paint. It's a good exercise for learning how to control graded washes on the sky and build light and dark values. If you have a chance, take a look at my website, sterlingedwards.com. You'll see a lot of southwestern scenes as well as other subjects. And be sure and check the calendar page. I might be doing a workshop near you. I hope to see you someday. Thank you.